Hey, first of all, before we start, can you guys hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay. Good, because I know our sound over there was a little bit quiet, so perfect. Well, good morning and welcome to our third annual Girls in STEM Day for Black Gold School Division. Though we are remote this year, it's a little bit different, but you know what? We've got a really cool day planned for us. And we're still excited to be able to hold this event yet once again. Our first ever Girls in STEM Day was held 4 years ago after I met a teacher from Southern Alberta who used to bring this little group of girls together every year and teach them how to code. And they would spend the day in her office and learn how to code a couple of times a year. And after that, we kind of went, hey, we could do something like that. So our first Girls in STEM Day was held 4 years ago, like I said. But at the time, we were the first school division to do something of this size and just, I guess, to do it this way, right? And since then, other school divisions have kind of gone, hey, we can do this too, and have also started holding their own Girls in STEM Day. So yay, kudos to Black Gold. We started something pretty cool here. Now, anyways, before we start anything today, we need to start by acknowledging that we're on Treaty 6 territory, the ancestral and traditional territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, Nakota, Sioux, as well as the Métis. We acknowledge the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for generations, including the places that you're joining from. We are grateful for their traditional knowledge keepers and elders who are still with us today and those who have gone before us. We recognize the land as an act of reconciliation and gratitude to those whose territory we reside on or are visiting. All right, so where do we keep on going here? There we go. So before we continue, I want to tell you a little bit about our day, but first, we have to send a huge thank you out to our sponsors. So our sponsors are the American Welding Society, the Lions Club of Leduc, and then of course, Black Gold School Division. Without their generous support, we wouldn't have been able to pull off the day that we have planned and in the way that we have planned it. So we do have an incredible day planned for you girls, starting with Dr. Shawna Pandya as our keynote speaker. We are so excited to have her join us shortly, and I know she's there waiting for us too. After Dr. Pandya, you're responsible for successfully completing a lunar resupply mission with Amanda Green. She's Black Gold's version of Miss Frizzle, in case you don't know her, and she's a hoot. After a super quick break, we're going to talk coding in medicine and learn how to code the microbits that you've all been gifted thanks to the AWS and the Leduc Lions Club. So that's with me at 11:15. Then after lunch, you get to meet Kimberly Mazzaro. So she's a Black Gold graduate, and actually she graduated with me, and a materials engineer. In case you were wondering why your bags contain spaghetti and hot glue, it's not for you to put together lunch today. It is because Kim is going to challenge you to structural build today. But, so why Girls in STEM, right? Like why even STEM? What is it even? So STEM stands for science, engineering, technology, and math. But the whole day, right, dedicated to a group of girls learning more about these fields. Why? Well, here's why. Because over the years, many studies have had girls of all ages draw what they think a mathematician or a scientist looks like. Like, what do they look like? Do you know what most of them drew? A male with glasses. That's how they pictured a scientist should look. There are so many stereotypes out there about who becomes a scientist, a mathematician, or even a software engineer. So why? Like, why is this even, right? What we do know is that women are really underrepresented in each of these fields. It's not that they aren't capable of doing the job, there just aren't enough out there yet. That is why we're here. So there's actually a high and there's actually a high and growing demand for skilled women to start filling these positions. Why? Well, because women and girls look at situations with a different perspective and lens than their male counterparts, and that perspective is also highly valued. There is a growing appreciation for diversity in these roles, whether it be gender, race, or even age. But unfortunately, although they are just as capable, women currently only make up 22% of the STEM workforce in Canada. As educators and a school division, we want to do better and do more to expose you to what's out there for you to explore by sparking your interest early. And at Black Gold, we want to provide you with what you need to pursue your dreams as you move ahead in school. So why are you here specifically? Well, you were asked to attend because a teacher at your school saw a spark in you. That's a pretty special thing. So they wanted you to not only have a fun day of learning, but also to show you the vast amount of opportunities that are available to you and to grow that spark into a flame. You could very well be our next generation of scientists or engineers or doctors. You could code something that will change people's lives, you know, more than Instagram and even more than TikTok, I know. So your generation is going to drive what the world ahead looks like. And how exciting would it be? Oh, hey, there we go. Sorry. Anyways, like I was saying, how exciting would it be to be a part of that drive? You know, that the technology that's saving lives or making it possible to do what was once impossible, that could be because of your contributions. Okay, I want to show you something from Girls Who Code that they sent me to show you. It talks exactly about the point I was just discussing.
Juniors and seniors in Austin as they graduate from a 7-week-long summer camp.
And not the kind of summer camp, though, with hiking and stuff like that. It's a bit different. It's all centered around computers. And Alicia Inns shows us how these new graduates may be answering a national need because they're women.
In a career that's dominated by men,
this is our first time ever doing it.
There's something to be said about girl power.
I never thought I'd be able to design a website, but I have.
It's one thing to browse a website, it's another to build one. But these girls, the Girls Who Code, are up to the challenge.
We were joking around about how we wanted to take a nap, and then the idea popped up like, hey, we should make a nap website.
And from there it became a real idea with a real product to help sleep-deprived college students.
Taking a nap for 20 minutes, you'll be energized, refreshed. It's easy to wake up from. But 30 minutes leaves you groggy.
Behind it all is finding the formula to keep girls interested in STEM subjects, from science and technology to engineering and math.
We should be able to just say, oh, look, there's a girl who codes. That's normal.
Right now, women make up the majority of the workforce nationwide, but only 25% of them have jobs in computing and technology. By 2020, there will be 1.4 million jobs available in these fields, but women are on track to only fill 3% of those.
And it's crucially important because their voices and perspectives are missing right now. They need to recognize that there are no limitations.
Proof that girls should not merely be part of the future, they should help shape it.
You can do it, yes.
Alicia Inns,
Yeah.
KXAN News.
Juniors and
So, if you were able to hear that, I don't know where Mr. McCubbing went, but we'll get him up here shortly so that he can help us with this sound issue before Dr. Pandya starts. Now, the first year that we did this event, one of our speakers connected to us through Google Meets all the way from New Jersey, which is pretty cool. So her name was Alice Keeler, well, it still is, and she's a coding guru. She actually started as a high school math teacher. She found herself using different programs to help her make her job easier, but they never quite did what she needed them to do. So she said, okay, that's enough. I'm going to solve this problem, and I'm going, we have no sound. I'm going to code my own stuff, and I'm going to make it what I need it to be. And she did. So not only did she design extensions that teachers all over the world use today, but she then took it to the next level. She actually stopped teaching and started to work for Google, coding apps and extensions for them. Then for Microsoft. And then at one point, she was even designing the code to run YouTube, like YouTube. So when she spoke to her girls, this is what she said. She said that her experiences, not just as a woman, but also as a mother, meant that she brought in a perspective that companies like Google and YouTube want, and actually they desperately need. So her perspective meant that she was able to create things that fit for people like her, right? For other women, for other mothers, for other teachers. There's an entire market for that. And successful businesses understand that importance of diversification, right? And understanding who their consumer is. But this is not just a coding issue, right? This applies to all sciences, whether it's in medicine, engineering, or inventing new technology. They want you, okay? Now, will some be skeptical? Yes, they will. Will it be easy? Nope. But nothing, right? Like if it's this worth it, nothing's easy, okay? So today, though, what is easy is going to, oh, that's not true. We have a little introduction to our day from a couple of our Alberta MLAs. So I'd like to introduce here Dr. Pandya is next. Raki Pancholi and Janice Irwin to give us some greetings this morning. Mr. McCubbin, come back here in case our sound doesn't work.
Hey everyone, Janice Irwin.
I'm just going to pause that a second. Let's just make sure this works.
But are you live streaming yet?
All right, here we go. Apparently on your side, it's coming in just fine.
Here, I am the MLA for Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
Hi everyone, my name is Raki Pancholi. I'm the MLA for Edmonton Whitemud.
And we are so excited that we were invited to say hello to all of you at your annual Girls in STEM Day. We're really sad, both Raki and I, that we can't be there today, but hey, we wanted to give you all a shout out and we wanted to show our support for the amazing work that the students, the staff, and all the speakers have done leading up to this fantastic day.
And I'm so thrilled, we're both so thrilled to know that Black Gold School Division is hosting this day for girls in STEM, because there could not be a better time to highlight the importance of STEM. I mean, over the past year, I think we've all seen firsthand how important science is, with the amazing work that was done to develop a vaccine so fast, but also about technology. We're all interfacing in technology in new ways. So this has been a year that showed us how important STEM is, and most importantly, how important it is for girls and women to get involved in STEM to lead the innovations of the future.
Absolutely. You're all leaders. We can't wait to come next year and be there in person and to see the amazing work that you're doing firsthand. So again, to everybody, thank you. We hope you have an amazing day today, and go crush it.
We'll see you soon. Thanks everyone. Have a great day.
Take care.
All right.
Hey, everyone.
So there are a couple of truly inspiring women to kick off our day. But now it's time for Dr. Shawna Pandya. So today we're going to hear a lot about how we can push the limits, starting with our amazing keynote speaker that I'm so excited to introduce today. Dr. Shawna Pandya is a scientist astronaut candidate with Project Possum, a physician, an aquanaut, a speaker, a martial artist, an advanced diver, a skydiver, a pilot in training, the VP of Immersive Medicine and Fellow of the Explorers Club. She's also Director of the International Institute of Astronautical Sciences, Possum Space Medicine Group, Life Sciences Team Lead for the Association of Spaceflight Professionals, and serves as medical advisor to several space companies. Dr. Pandya holds degrees in neuroscience from the University of Alberta, a master's in science, space studies, International Space University, a degree in medicine from the University of Alberta. In 2015, Dr. Pandya successfully completed scientist astronaut candidate training with Project Possum and was part of the first crew to test a commercial spacesuit in zero gravity. Dr. Pandya completed a 2-week tour at the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah as the crew health and safety organizer. Throughout her medical career, Dr. Pandya has had many unique experiences through rotations in cardiac surgery in India, orthopedic surgery in Ecuador, reconstructive surgery at Stanford, and aerospace medicine at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston. As part of her work at NASA, Dr. Pandya optimized the medical kit contents for a near-Earth asteroid mission. For her work, she's received many accolades and awards, including being named the Women's Executive Network's Top 100 Most Powerful Women in Canada for 2020. She's recently been named as an ambassador for the Possum 13, an initiative to make space opportunities and engagement more accessible to students and particularly young women. So
Is it live?
now that's a lot, and I could go on, but I won't. I'm going to let you hear from Dr. Pandya yourself, and she's clearly more interesting than even what I'm describing here. So Dr. Pandya, go ahead.
All right, can you see and hear me and see my slides okay, first of all?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, thank you so much for having me at this wonderful event. I am excited to kick off the day with you today. Before I begin, I know what you're wondering, and I'm sure you're probably asking yourself, is a flight suit as comfortable as it looks? And the answer is yes. I get to wear the equivalent of a onesie for work, so that's awesome. So I want to start off with a question. When you were younger, what was it that you wanted to be? Well, when I was younger, I had big ambitions. I wanted to do world-changing things. I wanted to push the limits. And so in my 4-year-old mind, that meant that I wanted to be a transformer. I wanted to be like Optimus Prime and fight crime and change the world. And then I realized that that's silly. You can't just grow up and be a transformer. What was I thinking? So then I grew up a little bit, and by this time I was 7 and decided to set my sights on more realistic goals. So then I decided I wanted to still change the world and do big, ambitious, world-changing things. So I decided that I wanted to be a superhero billionaire who would use my wealth for good to solve all the world's problems and end famine and war and explore space. And then I realized, well, that's not very realistic. You can't just go to school and get a degree in billionaireology. So I grew up some more, and then I turned my sights on what would become a lifelong passion. And for me, I was inspired by the night sky. I did a lot of camping growing up with my family. We were privy to these amazing night skies where you could see the Milky Way arm, the galaxy of Milky Way galaxy's arm, and just leap out at you, and you couldn't help but wonder what lay beyond. When I was a kid, I was also growing up in the era of Canada's second ever astronaut corps selection and training. And during that time, Canada's first ever female astronaut, Dr. Roberta Bondar, flew to space. And this is really what inspired me to want to become an astronaut. And so I started to look at her career, and I looked at all of her similarities. And I looked at all of the tick boxes, and I said, okay, well, she's female, I'm female. She's Canadian, I'm Canadian. She's a girl guide, I'm a girl guide. So now all I need to do is go be a neuroscientist, physician, astronaut, and I'm set. And a little bit later this talk, I want to tell you about the path that I followed and then the lessons I've learned. But the first thing I want to tell you today is whatever childhood dreams you have, whatever you realize as an adult, it's possible to surpass everything you dreamed that you could be about and be so much more and live an incredible life growing up. And I just want to spend some time telling you about what I get to do on a day-to-day basis in my everyday life. And the one-line summary is it's almost like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Every day is really different. So this is kind of a summary slide, but as you heard, I'm a physician, so I do general practice, women's health. I cover rural emergency room. I work in all 4 corners of the province. And it's kind of like a Batman Bruce Wayne scenario. So that's one of my identities, but I'm also a scientist astronaut candidate with Project Possum. So in the science and space and exploration world, we love our acronyms, and Possum is no different. Possum stands for Polar Suborbital Science of the Upper Mesosphere. And that's just a fancy way of saying that we enable citizen scientists That means qualified, passionate, good people with an interest in exploration and space. And this started off wanting to know more about how the science of our upper mesosphere and the clouds that live there work. And once we completed that ground school, a whole world of possibilities opened up to us. And I'm going to take you through some of the opportunities that we've been lucky enough to do. But before I do that, I think I'd rather show you. Let me just get here and make sure the sound is working. So I don't think the sound is coming through, but here is a video of one of our parabolic flights. And so this is how you achieve 0G on Earth without ever leaving the planet. So we fly lower than a commercial jet would fly at about 17,000 feet. We typically fly out of the National Research Council in Ottawa. We work in very closely, tightly knit teams to rehearse our maneuvers, and we use periods of zero gravity to test the spacesuit, see how it operates, see how much we can move, how much we can control fine motor movements with, say, this busy board and this joystick in front of us. And basically, the way we're doing that is through parabolic flight. And when you have an airplane that flies in a parabola, it's almost like when you're going down a roller coaster or descending in an elevator. It's when you're going down in an elevator, you're weightless for a brief second. You can feel your stomach just lift up for a second, and it's because you're falling at the same rate as the elevator, and so you're weightless for that brief period of second, that brief second in time. And so when you do that in a parabolic flight, which some of you may know as the vomit comet, it's because you're falling at the same rate as the plane and you're weightless for that period of 20 seconds in time. And that gives you enough time to test whatever it is you're trying to test, and in this case, spacesuit. So as you can imagine, it's a lot of fun. It's impossible to not be in a spacesuit and have a giant smile on your face. I've been doing these campaigns since 2015. We've been lucky enough to test commercial spacesuits. So again, in the space world, we love our acronyms, and that includes IVA spacesuit. So IVA stands for Intervehicular Activity Spacesuit, and that's just a way of saying it's a spacesuit that you would use as a secondary life support system while you're inside the craft. And I've been lucky enough to do some cool things like fly my black belt in 0G as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So we've also been lucky enough to do some other type of spacesuit testing. So here's another acronym, EVA, or Extravehicular Activity Spacesuit. So when you see astronauts doing spacewalks outside the International Space Station, when you see the Apollo astronauts walking on the moon, this is what they use. They use the EVA spacesuit, and the difference is it has a few more layers of protection for thermal protection against temperature extremes. It's either super, super hot or super, super cold in space, depending on where you are and if you're facing the sun. And it also offers extra radiation protection. So here we were at the Canadian Space Agency, and here's another way of simulating a different gravity environment. So every single one of us in this lecture right now have the benefit of living and sitting and experiencing this in 1G. So if we were to stick our hands out in front of us and let it drop, gravity would come to work. But in space, because you're falling at the same rate as your spacecraft, you're essentially weightless. So we always want to know how everything that we take to space is going to react, including spacesuits. So another way of simulating microgravity, 0G, or even altered gravity like you would have on the moon, which is 17% of what we would see on the Earth. We can also do that through a gravity offset system. So this is what you see in this picture here. So in this spacesuit, all those straps you see are actually offloading my weight, and we're actually simulating weightlessness, and I'm working on a simulated panel outside the International Space Station. And we also got to simulate scenarios in which we offloaded my weight by 83%, so 17% of my body weight, just like I would be on the moon. So if you're 100 pounds on Earth, you'd be 17 pounds on the moon and 33 pounds on the Earth, on Mars. We've also done some less space-related things, but also related to upper atmospheric science. So this was actually a Canadian campaign we did in 2017. We flew in a unpressurized research craft at high altitude at 19,000 feet outside of high-level Alberta. So that's about 8 hours north of Edmonton. And what we did was we would go up in this research craft. We had to wear these oxygen masks after a certain point to make sure we were getting enough oxygen. And we were testing that instrument you see behind my right shoulder to get more information about the three-dimensional structure of clouds. And it was being up north at that time of year is incredible because it never really gets dark. From about 1 to 4 a.m., you maybe see kind of this perpetual twilight, but the northern lights that come out and dance are just incredible. And on top of that, we saw these wispy, ghost-like noctilucent clouds, which is what we were there to study. And this was my first time ever seeing this phenomenon, so I thought it was always this beautiful. I thought you would always just go out and see these noctilucent clouds and always see the northern lights until the primary investigator, the main researcher of my campaign, came up to me and he said, this is only the second time in 7 years that I've seen both of these phenomena at once. And it was just incredibly beautiful. So if you ever have the chance to go up north, I highly recommend it. We also test our spacesuits in water scenarios. So like I said, in space, you never want to be surprised by anything. Space is hard, space is risky, space is expensive. So the more ground testing and the more preparation you can do ahead of time, the better off you'll be when you get to a high risk environment. And that includes not just during space flight, but once you hit the Earth. And so in some scenarios, your landing capsule will be landing in the water. And so you want to know how your spacesuit will react when it hits the water. And in this particular scenario, we were testing both how the spacesuit would react once you egressed or escaped from the Orion capsule that you see behind my right shoulder. And in another scenario, which I'll talk a little bit later, we were simulating coming off a parachute harness and then egressing into the water and then eventually swimming over to that life raft that you see over my left shoulder. The other cool thing about everything that I get to do is I get to merge my passions for medicine and for space together. So as you heard, I'm the director of the POSSUM and IIAS, International Institute of Astronautical Sciences, Space Medicine Group, as well as the chief instructor of the Operational Space Medicine course. And so what that entails is knowing about the challenges of living and working in a spaceflight environment. So if you know nothing about space and you know nothing about sending humans to space, all you need to know is that space is trying to kill you. So there's a lot of hazards and challenges with sending humans to space. So we talked about zero gravity, and every single one of our bodily systems is affected, from our bones to our muscles to our hearts and to our brains. We know that there's increased radiation in space, it's farther from Earth, and then when we're packing for space, we actually have to be very careful about how we pack because we're very limited with the amount of stuff we can bring and the total weight of stuff we can bring. So now imagine that you have a broken bone in this type of environment. You may have to treat it a little bit differently than you would on Earth. And so this is what we do in our course. We act as medical MacGyvers to work to provide medicine and assess and treat injuries in a resource limited setting that we may not see on Earth. You heard a little bit about some of the other hats I wear. So I've always been really passionate about technology and big challenges. And so one of the really cool things I get to do is I work with a company called Luxonic, and we are basically working to bring immersive technology like virtual reality, augmented reality, 360 video to do medical education better. So I became involved with this company in a very roundabout way, which I'll tell you about later. And I came on board when the Canadian Space Agency said it wanted to train its astronauts better for long duration missions to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And so we're currently developing a virtual reality medical training module for astronauts going to the moon and beyond. So why do we do this? Well, imagine that you first learned how to put an IV in someone or learned to do a medical hands-on procedure on Earth. It takes 6 to 9 months to get to Mars. Imagine the next time you had to practice that skill was 9 months later when you hit the red planet and suddenly you hadn't practiced that skill in a long time. Now imagine that I'm trying to start an IV on you. You're probably going to be a pincushion by the time I'm done because I haven't had a chance to practice. And so what if you could practice your skills in virtual reality? So this is one of the ways I get to merge my passions for space technology and medicine. I also get to wear another really cool hat that's almost a little bit like science fiction, and I still pinch myself that I get to do this, but we talked about space stations. What we see these days is that space isn't just for space agencies and for governments, but it's really everyone. Space should be for everyone. And I get to work with a company called Orbital Assembly Corporation to start building and designing a rotating space station that can generate gravity like you would see in Space Odyssey 2001 or The Martian. And the reason that's important is, like I talked about earlier, when we don't have gravity pulling fluid to our feet, when we don't have gravity weighing down our hands and our bones and our muscles, we can actually experience a lot of adverse health effects. So for example, we know that the brain juice that bathes our spines and our brains can experience increased pressure because that brain juice isn't draining as it would on Earth. And so we know that when astronauts spend more than 30 days in space, they tend to have more pressure around their eyeballs and their vision tends to change. Well, that's not very convenient or comfortable. So what if we could mitigate that by putting humans in at least a little bit of gravity? I also get to, I told you I wear a lot of different hats, and I get to do a lot of extreme environment exploration. So when we talk about extreme environments, we basically mean any environment in which we're out of our comfort zone, where we don't have the creature comforts of home, where we're resource limited, where things are a little bit different. And I think we can argue that in the COVID era, I think we're all living a little bit of an extreme environment. This is an example of one of the ways in which we prepare ourselves for space. So this is the MDRS, the Mars Desert Research Station, and it's like living real life on fake Mars. This is actually a Mars habitat that is in the Utah desert, 2 hours away from civilization. And basically, you live with your crew in this tin can as if you were on Mars. And every time you go out, you have to suit up as if you were going into the Martian environment, because to not do so would kill you. And it's this amazing place full of these sprawling vistas where it really feels like you're on Mars. You're surrounded by these incredible rock formations, these beautiful marbled pieces of red rock. It's simply stunning. So another example of a extreme environment and way in which we prepare ourselves for space is the water world. So I am an avid diver. I hold my certifications in open, advanced nitrox and rescue diving, as well as scientific diving and as an aquanaut. And here's another example of a way in which we prepare ourselves for space. So all these types of environments that are analogous in some way to the spaceflight environment, whether we're talking about the Vomit Comet or real life on fake Mars, these are called analog environments. And so this is another really cool example of how we prepare ourselves for space. So this is NEMO, or the NASA Extreme Environment Mission Operations Base at Aquarius Reef Base. This is a habitat, an underwater research habitat that you live in and work in as a crew for 8 to 16 days at a time. It's 60 feet underwater. I did my dive medical technician training there, so I was lucky enough to spend a night underwater there. And basically, the value of this type of environment, other than how beautiful it is when you live underwater at pressure, after 24 hours, you're considered to be in saturation because now you're breathing air at a much higher pressure than you would be at the surface of the water. And what that means is all of those bubbles that sit in your blood actually dissolve, and to now safely surface, you have to give those bubbles enough time to come out slowly, because if they come out too quickly, then they'll lodge in bad places like your lungs and your brain. And that's really dangerous. And so the other way to think about this is if you've ever had a pop can, and you've opened it when you're at the top of a mountain. The pressure differential is much higher, and suddenly that pop can explodes everywhere. And so it's the same thing. It's the same reason that we have to stay and come out of saturation slowly. So why is this a good way to prepare for space? It's because to safely get to the surface once you've been in saturation, it takes 15 hours and 47 minutes to safely decompress. For comparison, if you ever needed to evacuate from the International Space Station, you could be in Kazakhstan in as little as 3.5 hours. You can actually go from space to Earth faster than you could from the Aquarius Reef Base to the surface, safely, that is. So here's another example of an aquanautics mission that I did, or here's the first aquanaut mission that I did, and it's one that I'm extremely proud of. This is where I got my aquanaut designation. So, like I said, everything in the exploration world is an acronym. Neptune is no different. This was the Neptune mission, which stands for Nautical Experiments in Physiology, Technology, and Underwater Exploration. And along with an incredible crew of 4 other members from the US and Canada, we spent 5 days underwater at the Jules Undersea Lodge, working on experiments in physiology, psychology, cognition, technology, and more. And this actually wasn't too far from the Aquarius Reef Base. This was only 13 miles away, but this place was only 20 feet underwater, so we didn't have that same danger if we needed to surface immediately. But what was really cool was that even at 20 feet of pressure, we could see differences. One of my crewmates brought a pack of marshmallows with him, and by the time we brought it down to our habitat with us, it was squished. I'm also really lucky to be able to participate in a lot of different interests and hobbies. I've been a martial artist since I was 15. I'm a 2nd degree black belt in Taekwondo. I've trained and fought in Muay Thai. I fought in my first amateur fight in Thailand in 2017. It was a crazy fight, but somehow I won. I'm a pilot in training, just wrapping up my private pilot's license. I have my accelerated free fall skydiving license. And I also get to tell the world about what I do, what I'm passionate about, and share the lessons I've learned. And one of my aha moments that I realized that all of the dreams that you can have when you're a kid, when you're young, if you work really hard towards, my aha moment was a few years ago at the Ontario Science Centre when they were opening up an exhibit featuring Canadian women in space. And they featured my childhood hero, Dr. Bondar. And my holy cow moment was they also featured me alongside my childhood hero. And that's when I realized that dreams really can come true. So I'm sure you're all wondering, okay, but how? How did you get there? What path did you take? So I want to tell you kind of where I went after I started off from this kid with big dreams who realized that you couldn't really be a transformer or a billionaire superhero, but maybe you could do some pretty cool things. So when I was your age, this was me when I was 17, I kind of had my plan set. So you heard how it was inspired by Dr. Bondar. And so knowing her background, I knew that I wanted to go into neuroscience and then medicine, and then that would be my path. And so after high school, I applied to the neuroscience program at the University of Alberta. I got in, and for me, it was always point A to point B, go get that medical degree, and then go pursue your path to medicine, to space. And that's when I realized that medicine is actually very competitive. And I knew extremely smart, brilliant, lovely people who were, fantastic candidates who weren't even getting interviewed. And that's when I realized I needed a plan B. And I asked myself, well, if I didn't get into medicine after my neuroscience degree, what would I spend the year doing that I would be equally excited and passionate about? And as you may have guessed, that answer was definitely space. And so I knew of a place called the International Space University that had a master's program. And I decided to apply to that as my plan B. And to my surprise, I got into both medicine and the International Space University. And this became one of the first really good but hard decisions I had to make. Did I go into medicine and just, leave my space dreams to be dreams? Or maybe I could do both. And I asked my faculty of medicine for a deferral, explaining my reasons. And to my surprise, they said yes. And that was the beginning of realizing that I could turn my dreams into a career. And the lesson I learned there was that sometimes it's worth looking for opportunity, but also being willing to take that risk of the path less traveled. This was the beginning of realizing that space medicine can be something you do on a daily basis. So it was like a year at Starfleet Academy. These are all the women in my class that year. We had 50 students from 31 countries. This was a class trip we took to Star City in Russia. So ISU is based in Strasbourg, France, right in the Swiss-German-French border. So we got to take a class trip to Star City in Russia, where the cosmonauts train. We're standing outside a Soyuz space capsule here. And coming back to how this translated into my career, as part of my internship at the master's program, I was lucky enough to intern at the European Space Agency's European Astronaut Center in their crew medical support office. And my master's thesis work was related on that. And this was my first foray into learning, hey, I can do research, I can publish on this. I actually wrote my first book chapter on space medicine coming out of this program. And all of these opportunities, they snowballed and they led to the next opportunity and the next opportunity. So after the European Space Agency, I set my sights on the next opportunity that I'd been aware of since high school, that I knew I was a thing, but I knew I wouldn't be able to apply for until I was in my final year of medical school. And that was the NASA Johnson Space Center Aerospace Medicine elective. And I was sponsored by the Canadian Space Agency to go down there in my last year of medical school. After waiting 10 years to apply, I was finally accepted. This is my class from that year. There's astronaut Kjell Lindgren. He's flown on the International Space Station. And again, in this elective, we got to work on problems related to space medicine, especially for longer duration missions. And along the way, I got to attend some really cool conferences and meet some familiar faces, like Bill Nye. I asked him about his bow ties once, and he told me that even if people try to give him regular ties, he will have them made into bow ties. So there's your fun fact of trivia for the day. Before long, it came time to graduate and go back to medicine. But honestly, this was the start of it all, because what I learned is it's possible to have multiple dreams in multiple avenues and live them out, but you just have to work really, really hard to get there and have a plan. And so in the time remaining to us today, I also want to shed a little bit of reality on this and tell you about some of the key lessons that I've learned that have helped me get through my career, get through bumps and lumps, and also keep going when the going is going really well. So the first thing I want to say is, when we think about success, it's easy to think of success as having just woken up like this. You go from point A to point B, and it is all sunshine and rainbows. When in reality, success looks a lot more like this. It's a road full of lumps and bumps, and there's a way to fail productively. And so how do we do that? So the first thing to acknowledge is that we're all going to fail. We've all failed, and it's just how we deal with it that matters. So it is okay to fail. So we need to learn to fail productively. So I want to tell you the story behind this picture. I've flown zero G a lot of times. It's incredibly fun, but it can be a little bit nauseating. There's a reason we call it the vomit comet. So I told you we typically fly out of the National Research Council in Ottawa, but this particular year, this was 2017, we were flying a brand new campaign, brand new company out of a brand new place with a brand new spacesuit. There were all of these unknowns, and so some of the more experienced flyers within our community were asked to be part of this test campaign. And so we were flying out of Florida. It was a brand new aircraft, and so something felt off that day, but I didn't say anything. It was like, it was fine. You have one job. You just need to test a spacesuit, walk it off. It's fine. We got 5 parabolas in to a 30 parabola flight before the test director took one look at me. He is like, "You are looking way too green. Knock it off. We're going to abort the flight." 10 seconds later, I threw up. And then I kept throwing up over and over and over. And I'm just going to spare you the mental image of what it's like to throw up in zero gravity, but let's just say it's super gross. And the other thing is, when the visor in your helmet is down, it's actually a real asphyxiation risk, because if you choke on that, well, it's not very good. And so I felt horrible because, as my teammates would say, you had one job. That was just to test the spacesuit. And we lost out on a lot of data. We only completed 5 of 30 parabolas. And I felt really, really down on myself. But then, my team kind of came to my rescue, and we kind of debriefed through this. And this is one of the key lessons I've learned about how to fail productively, is learn to debrief. This is something that we do before every single zero gravity campaign, after every single flight, after every dive, after every skydive, anything operational, whether things are good or whether things are bad. We sit around as a team, or if I'm on my own, I sit down with myself and I go through the scenario second by second and pick out the good, the bad, and the not so great. And the idea is, I want to reinforce the things that went well so I can do those as well the next time and reinforce that pattern of performance. Or I also want to dissect the things that went not so well, so I can avoid that situation in the future. So in this particular case, I looked at all of the things that were suboptimal that day, why I didn't feel so great. I felt overheated. I didn't feel good from the start. And I tried to mitigate everything that contributed to my feeling unwell on that Florida flight in 2017. And a few weeks later, taking all of those lessons learned into account, I was able to successfully complete my next campaign out of the National Research Council in Ottawa. So the next lesson I want to tell you that I've learned is all about resilience. So what does that even mean? You may have heard it as mental toughness, grit, stick-to-itiveness. And basically it means cultivating that inner toughness to help you keep going when the times are going great, but you just need to keep up the pace, and to help you bounce back when the going's not so great, like living in a pandemic. And so it's easy to think that some people are born more tough mentally than others, but that's not what the research says. It says that it's a learned trait. It's something that we can learn, and we can break it down into its key components. And so it helps to know what those key foundations are. And basically it comes down to breaking really big problems down into key components, positive self-talk, telling yourself that you have this, mental rehearsal for both the best and the worst case scenarios. Chris Hadfield calls this the power of negative thinking in his book, An Astronaut's Guide to Earth. And it's talking about what you'll do if things don't go so great, as well as if things go well. Impulse control, resisting that urge to give into negativity or to give up. And then positive social support, relying on your team, relying on your friends, relying on your crew to get you through both way in tough times and also when top of your game. So that's a lot of theory, but let me tell you how I put it into practice. So I promised you a little bit earlier this talk, I was going to tell you about one of my water testing scenarios. So this was when we were testing the IVA spacesuit in a mock ocean landing scenario. We were parachuting down into the ocean, and all we had to do in this scenario was unlatch ourselves from the harness, pull up our visor, deploy the portable flotation devices that you see, those yellow little bags there, pull the seals on our suits so no water could get in, swim over to the spacecraft, climb up the rope ladder, declare ourselves home free. Simple, right? Not so much in my scenario. Almost immediately upon landing in the water, I didn't pull the seals quickly enough, and my suit took on a lot of water. So as you can imagine, by the time I got to the bottom of that rope ladder, not only was I pulling up my body weight as well as the weight of the spacesuit, but an entire spacesuit full of water. So what should have been a 2-minute scenario turned into a 10-minute scenario as I tried to go up the ladder millimeter by millimeter, trying not to fall off because it was so darn heavy. Every component of resilience came into play that day to get me through that scenario. So there was that mental rehearsal of putting myself into an actual ocean scenario and realizing that if I gave up, well, then I would essentially drown. There was that positive self-talk telling myself that I had this. There was that breaking things down, not looking from getting from the bottom to the top of that ladder, but just working on the next millimeter of ground gained. There was that impulse control, fighting with my fingers, which were shaking by that time, trying not to give up and trying not to let them seize up and fall off the ladder. And finally, there were the positive social support networks. My team was standing around that pool that day, cheering me on, telling me that I had this. And they may as well have been in the pool there with me, helping me out. The last lesson I learned from the scenario is that success isn't always pretty and success isn't always perfect. I did eventually complete that scenario, and my success looked like this. And just to orientate you there, that big orange blob of a human goldfish, that's me. And then up here by the screen, that in the top right corner is my foot sticking up in the air, tangled in the ladder, and I am face first in that raft. So our ideas of what success and failure look like, success isn't always pretty and success isn't always perfect, and we can actually learn a lot from failure. So I talked about the importance of resilience, but I really want to hammer home one of the key lessons I've learned from martial arts, and that is perseverance. We have several key tenets that we teach every single white belt who comes through our dojang door in Taekwondo. And one of those is perseverance, not giving up, that stick-to-itiveness. And there's a sign on our dojang wall that says, fall down 7 times, get up 8. Like I said, we're all going to fail. I showed you that I've definitely had suboptimal outcomes before, but as long as you have the will to go on, you can actually learn a lot and you can make yourself better from failure. So I know there's probably a lot of questions about how do you get to where you want to be if you have a lot of life ambitions? So I often get asked, well, how do you do this? How are you skydiving and piloting and being a doctor and a black belt and learning different languages and testing spacesuits and working with companies to develop technology? And the answer is relax. It's not like I am flying a plane to work, skydiving out of it, landing in the ocean, emerging on the beach, crawling, like running into the emergency room just in time to deliver a baby, and that's my day. That's not it at all. We all have the same 24 hours, and I like to say there's a season for everything. So I'm sure a lot of you play sports. So if you are, if you're a volleyball and a basketball and a badminton and a soccer player, you're not training for all of these sports in the same season. You're going to prioritize one sport over the other as the season demands. And it's the same thing with your life priorities. Figure out what it is that's most pressing based on both your timelines as well as your values. The other key lesson that I use to help me stay on track is a lesson I learned from piloting, and it's called maintaining a rate of scan. And this is no different if you're driving a car. So if you're driving a car or if you're piloting a plane, you want to look at your instrument panel, your dashboard, the world around you. If you're in your car, you're looking at your rear view mirror as well as the road ahead of you. And the idea is you want to know where you are in relation to where you've been and in relation to where you're going. And goal setting is no different. So for me, I set my immediate term goals, my short-term goals, my intermediate term goals, and my long-term goals. And then I'm constantly maintaining that rate of scan and between each of those. So I know that where am I versus where I want to be and what is my progress on the way to get there. And it's you don't have to be piloting a plane or driving a car to know how useful it is to keep on checking in with yourself and your progress. So in the last couple of minutes here, I want to share a couple more key lessons with you. So the third last lesson I want to share with you is figure out who it is you want to be. And sometimes it takes sitting down with yourself and asking yourself those active questions. Ask yourself, what are your values? Who is it that you want to be? And how close are you to becoming that person? And what is that gap between who you want to be, who you are now? And how do you close that gap? And what is your code of conduct? What are your rules that you adhere by? So for example, one of the best lessons I've learned is from my dad, who's often told me that your reputation is one of the most important currencies you'll ever have. And I really took that to heart. So that's part of my code of conduct. Integrity and staying true to my vision of who I want to be is always at the top of that list. And finally, I definitely want to address the imposter syndrome, because every single one of us, myself included, has often felt like, hey, maybe I'm not good enough. How do I address it? Well, I actually asked that question. Well, is there any merit to that? Do I not feel smart enough? And if so, Why do I feel like that? Is it because I'm not reading enough? Is there truth to that? Well, then yes, all I need to do is pick up a book. And if not, that voice can go away. The other part of that is realizing what is free versus what will cost you nothing. So we often talk about how certain people are more talented, or they just seem to have that more athletic ability, more academic ability. But there's certain things that cost you nothing to develop. And that's discipline, organization, and a work ethic. If you develop the best work ethic of anyone you have, if you work really, really, really hard, that's not something you're born with, that's something you develop over time. The second last lesson I want to share with you is surround yourself with good people. So my mom is in this picture because she's one of those good people in my life. But really everyone that I work with in medicine and my crew, they would walk through walls for me, but I would do the same for them. No one gets to where they are as a single person without an entire team behind them, and that's true for me. When when I'm on my extreme environment missions, I definitely have a crew that I'm working with. That I work with on the ground. Sometimes I have a remote support crew. So none of us is an island. And the last lesson I want to share with you is remember to pay it forward. I wouldn't be where I am if a lot of people hadn't taken the time to invest in me and my career when I was starting out. And some of you may know this familiar face is Chris Hadfield. And when I first got to NASA as an intern, he phoned me and I didn't realize who it was. So I put him on hold because I lost my passport. And I said, can you hold on for a sec? And then I realized who it was. He took the time when he was training to be the commander of the International Space Station to spend time with myself and the other medical students and talk to us about what a career in space was like. And I never forgot that because it's not like he wasn't busy. He was training to run the International Space Station. And so I know a lot of you are going to become incredibly successful, that you're just starting out today. But don't forget that no matter where you are, even at this stage in your career, someone is looking up to you, someone admires you. Maybe it's someone in the grade below you. Maybe it's in one of the sports teams or the Girl Guide groups that you're a part of. But whether you realize it or not, you're a role model and you can always, always pay it forward. So I started out talking about pushing the limits. And I want to encourage you to always keep pushing those limits. Why do we do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. To nerd out for a little bit, for a second here, I think it's a lot like materials stress testing. Why do we stress materials? Why do we push them to the limit? Well, there's two reasons. So we know what the limit is, so we either know not to go near that limit in the future, or so we can reinforce and strengthen and go even further and push harder than we did before. And its character is exactly the same. We push our limits so we know where our comfort zone is, but also sometimes to say, hey, I want to go faster and higher and further than I did last time. And then the final why of why we push our limits is we would not know what amazing things lay to be explored next. And this is something that I found out at the Mars Desert Research Station. Myself and my EVA partner, we would climb up the steepest, most slippery slopes. And if we didn't do that, we would not be privy to incredible views like this. This is why we push the limits, to know what comes next. So I know maybe a few years from now, you all have dreams, you're starting out, and someday I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be here in the audience waiting to shake your hand and ask you questions afterwards. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm so excited to hear your questions. Here's where you can find me on social media. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandya. Maybe there we go. We'll just stop sharing here. There, now they can see us. Okay, hey, wow, what an honor, I gotta say, like, just to have you talking to us today. We do have some questions, and I'm just gonna bring them back up here. So I have a question from Ali, and she asks, does Dr. Pandya have even more goals to achieve or to build on her achievements? So that bucket list you mentioned yesterday to me, maybe you can tell us about that.
Absolutely. I have a whole schwackload of things I still want to do. So I haven't made it down to Antarctica yet. I would love to do a medical rotation down in Antarctica. To the surprise of no one, absolutely getting to space. I haven't been to space yet, but I hope to. That's definitely on my bucket list. Want to finish off my pilot's license and then go for designations after that. There's so much I want to do. There's only 24 hours in a day, but that would be kind of the top few.
Yeah, kind of never enough minutes, hey, to do all the things we want to do. So here's a question, also from Chanvalet. How many languages do you know?
Oh gosh, depends how well we're talking about. So I'm fluent in English, French, and Gujarati. Gujarati is a dialect of Hindi. That's what my parents grew up speaking. I'm currently learning French and Russian. Sorry, not French. I'm fluent in French. I'm learning Spanish. But I can say things like "Ya ne govoril po-ruski horosho," which means I don't speak Russian very well. But it's a lot of fun to learn, and that's actually one of my ways to relax every day is just spend a little bit of time doing some language lessons.
I have another question here from Beaumont Comp, I believe. So they want to know about med school. How was the process to get in? So basically, what was the process to get in when you applied? Can you speak more to that?
Yeah, so medical school is what they're looking for is they want to know that you have several capabilities. So first of all, they want to know that you can handle and study and successfully absorb a large amount of material, so that you're doing that. So they want to see that you're doing well intellectually. Some schools, in addition to your grades in your undergraduate degree, may want to see that you've written the MCAT, which is the Medical College Admissions Test. I think they're moving away from that now. But more than that, like it's one thing to have good study skills, but they want to see that you're a good person who cares about the community, who has leadership skills. So they also want to see that you're well-rounded. And so that you're part of your community, maybe that you're part of sports teams, that you're also taking on initiatives. And they also want to see that you're a good person who has compassion as well. Every medical school that you apply to will have their criteria listed on their website as to what percentage they afford each of those criteria, like leadership, academic abilities, reference letters. And it's evolving a bit now. So like I said, I think some schools are moving away from the MCAT. But basically, they want to see that it's not just excellence in one domain, it's not just good grades, but it's a whole host of things.
Yeah, balance there. Now, any other questions, girls? Anything else that you want to ask before we let Dr. Pandya go on with her day? Those are some really good ones. Yeah. Okay. Well, if you do have any, maybe, oh, hold on. There's one more from Covenant Christian. So which sports did you play in high school? Oh, and what was your academic average? Ooh, that's a deep question right there.
Oh gosh, yeah. Okay, so sports that I played, Taekwondo was a big one. In the summers, I played soccer. I think those were my two big sports. And then, at least that I can think of, when I was younger, I was into skating because, I mean, we're Canadian, right? And then, so I was into the winter sports. But those were my big two. And then my average, I think it was 95. It was a long time ago. Something like that. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that's impressive. Okay, so this next one, oh, proud mommy moment, because this is my daughter. She asks, did people tell you you can't do it?
Yeah, I think you're going to be met with negativity or even well-meaning advice the entire way. And I think my answer to that is at the end of the day, you're going to be the one who best has a sense of what resonates with you versus what doesn't. And you're the one who has to live with your decisions. You're the one who's in your head 24/7. And so I'll give you an example, and I'm sure a lot of you with Indian moms can relate to this. Saying, hey, don't forget about learning this life skill. Don't forget about learning to be a good cook, or if you're my age, don't forget about getting married and settling down. And it's well-meaning advice, but at the end of the day, like I said, you're the one who has to live with your decisions, and you're the one who knows what resonates most with you. So even if it's not as adversarial as people say, you can't do it, because you're going to meet those people, and the people who know what your goals are and are actively telling you that, they're not really your friends unless they can give you a good reason why. But even the people who are well-meaning, you have to consider their advice, consider its impact on you, and say, is this relevant to me or not? So it's going to be a lifelong thing, and sometimes there's a reason that they're saying this advice, and it may be worth considering, and sometimes not.
This next one is actually current here. So how did the current pandemic impact your job?
Oh gosh. Well, very much living in the virtual world now. So in terms of clinical work, that has only increased. And so from February of last year until the first week of January, I didn't take any time off from clinical work. And as you can imagine, at periods, especially in the emergency room, I got quite busy. And then in terms of the virtual world, so all of our possum operations in person have been moved to virtual. So we put all of our microgravity testing, all our space testing on hold until we're confident of safety. But that doesn't mean we haven't been able to do cool things like hold virtual classes. I still taught my operational space medicine course virtually. I've taught some classes at the U of A virtually. I took an orbital mechanics course virtually. So the short answer is the goals are the same. It's just been a little bit, and in some case, a lot of course correction to stay on that trajectory.
Okay. Are you good to take 2 more questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So I've got, how do you show, so this one's coming from Beaumont Comp, how do you show that you are a well-rounded person on your resume? So how do you showcase those skills and not just the academics?
Yeah, sure. So it really depends on how you organize your resume, but I have headings for everything from jobs to skills to certifications to awards to public talks to academic talks to hobbies. And you can have whatever headings you want and how you want to showcase it for what's relevant for what you're applying for. But the key thing is update frequently, because otherwise you're not constantly giving credit to what you've done in the past. So, just take that second to update your resume that when you have a new position that you want to showcase on that, because it's easy to forget about that. So constantly update your resume.
Okay. And then I have some students who want to know if there's another route to space that isn't in the medical field. So what other routes could you take if you wanted to become an astronaut? And they also want to know how many years did you do in post-secondary school?
Oh God, like a million. So how many years of post-secondary school? Let's see, 4 years of undergrad plus a year of a master's plus 4 years of medical school. Plus I took a year off between second and third year medical school to start a company. Then before I went into family medicine, I did 3 years of neurosurgery. And then I did 2 years of 2 years of family medicine. And then I did a couple years of enhanced surgical skills fellowship. So pretty much a million at this point. But it's over 15. It's been a lot. And then the other answer to the question is other routes to space. So the traditional path to space as a governmental space agency astronaut has been very, very STEM heavy. So we've seen pilots, we've seen a lot of military pilots, we've seen engineers, we've seen PhDs in biochemistry. And then we also often see a focus on education. We've seen teachers in space. Dottie Metcalf was an example of a teacher. And then the really cool thing about being alive at this time in history is the rise of the commercial space sector. And I often like to say that there's space for everyone. So I don't want anyone to feel like if they have an interest in art or journalism or entrepreneurship, that space isn't for you. There's space for, if you're passionate about space, figure out what other sector you're passionate about and how you want to impact and help grow access to space, because we need storytellers as well. We need technologies to help us increase our access to space. So as an astronaut, traditionally STEM, but also there's a lot of room for that to grow.
Wow. Yeah, and there's a question about how did you pay for all that education? I can't even imagine.
Yeah, I was really, really lucky. So this comes down to coming back through and keeping an eye out for opportunity. So I was really lucky and had a lot of scholarships. So I had pretty much all of my years except one of my years of schooling covered by scholarship. So I had a full scholarship through undergrad, and then enough scholarship from that to carry over into medical school, scholarship for the master's program. So I realized that's the key lesson of acknowledging the forms of privilege that we all have, because it's often easy to hear that, oh, you're an underdog because you're a woman in STEM, or you know, that you're maybe the underdog in some fashion. But the other way to look at it is we all have forms of privilege that we need to acknowledge, and then take that privilege and that gratitude for that privilege and extend it to someone else to help lift them up.
Yeah, great response. Okay, so like I said before, it is such a huge honor just to even have you talking to our girls today. And everything you said it's just so important for them to hear these messages from somebody who has lived the experience and isn't done living that dream yet, clearly. But your drive and your accomplishments, all of these things, like literally beyond this world. Like they really are. And so inspiring. So thank you so much for your wisdom today. We really appreciate having you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Have a wonderful day, everyone. I'm so excited to hear what you come up with today. Thank you for having me.
We're excited to see it. So thank you. We will let you go. And then girls, so you're going to have a like 7-minute break right now. And this is your chance to log off of this, and you're going to use that second link that we sent you because the rest of our day is closed to the public. For those of you who did get through and watch today's story about that streaming delay, just some technical difficulties we had first thing this morning, but we are going to record, or we do have it recorded, I should say, and we are going to post it on YouTube afterwards, and we will let you know when that's all ready to go. So again, thank you so much for joining us today. And for girls, I will see you at, how about 10:05, Mrs. Green? Yep. 10:05, we'll start then, okay? Thanks.